Okay, I've got 7 o'clock, and we wanted to get this thing started on time and try to maintain a good schedule. I basically just want to welcome everybody for coming. I appreciate the attendance. Hopefully this will be a very informative meeting. And tonight, Jack Foster, one of our board members, is going to be the facilitator. I'm going to turn it over to him. He's going to go over the guidelines, the rules to be followed, and the procedures we're going to take. So, Jack, at this point,
perfect.
It's all yours.
Thanks. All right, everyone heard me? Perfect. So quick reminder on phones, just turn them off so we don't get interrupted. Okay, so the goal of this session is to provide a time for each of the official parties interested in the usage of Sierra 2 Green to present their points of view in a controlled and respectful setting. We will be recording the session for the purposes of posting it to the SCNA website, just so we have a full record of what was said. There's no misstating it after the fact. We have a full record. It's open to whoever wants to go and see it. So let's be respectful. The discourse on this topic has been a bit rancorous over the past few months, as we know. We've had members of our board accosted in public. There's been some incidents, in person, and also plenty of mudslinging on the internet. So the goal of this session is to come together, have a bit of empathy for each of the sides. We all live in this neighborhood. I hope we can use this session to, have a little bit of community, treat each other as neighbors. We have a lot of shared interests. And so for this session, let's try and focus on facts, not opinions, and, logic instead of emotion, all that kind of stuff. But let's just try and understand where everyone's coming from and have a good, and share our points of view rationally. Speaking of non-neighborly behavior, if you do intrude on someone's speaking time, we're going to give you one warning. If you do it again, we're going to ask you to leave. The types of things that will result in a warning are interruptions while someone's speaking, interjecting, sidebar conversations. We'll give you a fair warning, but let's try and keep that to a minimum if we can. Okay, so speaking roles. We've asked each of the presenters, there's 5 groups, to prepare some remarks around their reaction to the city's proposals that were presented last week, their concerns on the usage of the space currently, and what they hope to see happen here. So I'm hoping that each of you use your time. You can use it however you want, but I'm hoping you use your time to address those topics and not your opinions of the other groups, what you think of them. Let's keep it on message and focus on that. So how the session will work. We have 5 groups. Each group will be given up to 10 minutes to present, and the order of the groups to present has already been determined based on the last names of the presenters. It's kind of random. No PowerPoint presentations. It doesn't seem like anyone has that, but handouts are encouraged, and I can see many of you took advantage of that, so that's great. In terms of timing, so Mimi is going to be our timer. If you're using the full time, Mimi's going to raise her hand, give you the 5-minute. She'll raise her hand, give you the 1 minute, and then give you the cutoff. We're going to cut you off at 10 minutes. We have a tight schedule. We don't want to be rude, but she's going to give me the sign, and I'm going to say, okay, yeah, that's enough. Each of the 5 groups, you all have a piece of paper. So each group can write down 1 question for the group that just presented. So the way it's going to work is, I'm presenting my point of view. You're writing down your question, 1 per group. We're going to have Jerry, our runner, come around, take the questions. I'm going to read through them, make sure they're relevant. Again, it's not what you think of the other people. It's clarifications, relevant, on-topic questions. I'll read through them, just make sure they're relevant. And then the person who's presenting will stay up here, and we'll ask you 4 questions. We'd like you to answer each of them within a minute. If we can, make them brief. Hopefully the questions are not open-ended. So yeah, no, that's a good point. So we'll pose the question. You guys can sidebar for a few seconds, and then one of you can answer it. I'm hoping they're not going to be super in-depth. They're just going to be, hey, could you clarify what you mean? That type of thing. Yeah. But you take your time. We're trying to do it a minute, but it's not going to be okay, that's enough. We can be a little more fuzzy on that timing, so you have a chance to think, and then give a quick response. Any other questions? Otherwise, I'll introduce the groups, and we can get going. Okay, all right, perfect. So the order of the presentations, first up, we're going to have Common Ground, represented by Trish Davey and Dan Bernstein. Next, we're going to have Kinsley Earl, who's a representative of Land Park Soccer. Then we'll have Ann Linton from Families for Sierra 2 Park. Then we'll have Dog X with Talene Gazarian and Dave Knox. And then we'll have Terry Shettle to present on behalf of the Sierra 2 tenants and facilities. So with that, Common Ground, you want to come up here? Perfect.
I have allergies, and so I have to have my Kleenex and my water. Thank you so much. My name is Trish Davey. Good evening, all. And I've lived in Curtis Park since 1983. I represent Common Ground. We are a group of around 100 or more. We grow every day. Members, we are all from Curtis Park. Many are SCNA members, but we all live here in the park. Some of us have dogs. Many of us don't even have dogs, but we might have children or we've had children who grew up here in Curtis Park and have used Sierra 2 for any number of activities. Last fall, when things came to a head, I started talking with my neighbors. Everybody was upset because we've always shared it. That's been our neighborhood way. So the idea to form Common Ground, interestingly, came from a young doctor and his 3 kids who was very upset in the park. And I was upset too, and this is last November, December or so. And I tried to talk with him, and he tried to talk with me, and we actually persisted, and we had some conversations, which was great. In any event, I finally said, "What do you need?" And he said, "What I want is a space in the park where there are no dogs off leash, where I can take my kids and use the playground with no dogs, where I can kick a ball around." I mean, her kids are like that age. They're not ready to be without parents. Kick my ball around, throw soccer, play, throw a Frisbee, use the basketball court without dogs off leash. I thought, well, that's not unreasonable. Why can't we have that? And then I also happen to be a soccer fan. I didn't want to be in a position where we had to choose soccer over dog use. We've never had to before because we shared the field. We time-shared it. So we formed a group, and we got together, and we said, how did we get here? How did we all get in this neighborhood pickle? And we all agreed we went through a pandemic, and a lot more people worked from home, and they adopted dogs. There were more dogs in the neighborhood. The midday rules about off-leash dogs were not enforced. It became known on the internet, of all places, as Sacramento's best dog park. We were never, in the last many decades, a city dog park. We were always a neighborhood shared use. So we got together as Common Ground to talk about how can we work this out. We don't want to lose soccer if we can, if there's some way. We don't want to lose the opportunity to have some of our neighborhood dogs off leash. What we want to explore together is, are there post-pandemic, neighborhood scale solutions to share the green? We don't want the dog park. The city said, here's your dog park. No, you can't have soccer. Why was that the only option? That doesn't make sense. That's not what our neighborhood, I think, wants. We want our children to be safe. We want the green to be green. We want the neighbors with dogs to have some opportunities, somehow, with limitations, to be able to play chuck-it with their dogs. We want these things. I mean, we've had them before. So I think we need to go back to the table as a neighborhood, as various stakeholders of the green, with the city. They need to be involved. With Rick Jennings, he needs to be involved. We need to be convened. We need the opportunity to talk to one another. To our knowledge, okay, well, let me go back. So we began researching this. So there are communities all over the West Coast and other areas that share facilities. They share facilities. They share neighborhood parks, athletic fields, schoolyards, beaches, either by time. The off-leash dogs can only be here by a set time. Is that my 1 minute? Okay, either by time or by can only be in this space. Many of them, just locally in Davis, are on soccer fields in neighborhood parks adjacent to neighborhoods and also adjacent to playgrounds that are not even fenced. And okay, so it's been done. So somehow or another, other communities have figured out that it can be done. With all the liability issues and all the other things, it can be done. So what we're asking is, can we come together? We worked hard to get invited here. We're so happy to be here. And we're happy that we can hear what others think. And maybe we can come to that common ground. Thank you. Thank you for listening.
Yeah.
Give me my water. Sorry.
Here you go.
Don't take from his time while I have to eat my
No, I haven't started him yet. He has to start talking.
All right, good evening, everyone. As Trish said, I'm Dan Bernstein. I, too, have been in this neighborhood for over 30 years with my family. I've raised 2 daughters here. We've used the playground at Sierra 2. When they got a little older, they played soccer. I coached the soccer team at Sierra 2. I've been there when there have been both dogs on the park and soccer players on the park. In my experience, it's worked very well. Now, I know when the pandemic came along, things got a little more difficult. There were more dogs. The hours weren't enforced. But we feel like with some better enforcement and with some better arrangements, we can make it work again to the satisfaction of most of the people in the neighborhood. Now, when the city released its plans for the various options for a dog park, we were both surprised and dismayed. We were surprised because we thought that a mixed use would still be on the table, that we would be considered. We had been talking with Rick Jennings and other city officials, and they led us to believe that all points of view were going to be considered, and we were never told that it was not feasible anymore, even though we knew there were problems. We were dismayed because the only option that was put forward for Sierra 2 was the exclusion of soccer. It was a large dog park on the north end that would not allow enough space for a soccer field. So when it came to voting on the various proposals, we encouraged our members, like Trish said, we have 100 members, to vote for the Sierra 2 option, not because we want to remove soccer, but because it was the only way to keep what we want on the table. We want to maintain an ability to have off-leash dogs at Sierra 2, and that seemed to be the only option we had. Now, the question then becomes, well, how are you going to do it? We had problems during the pandemic. How are you going to fix those? Well, we don't profess to have all the answers, but we do have a couple of suggestions, and in the handout that we provided, there are 2 maps, both of which we think are at least starting points to continuing to use at least part of Sierra 2 as an off-leash facility. The first option is this one that has a horizontal line parallel to 4th Avenue. And that would be a fence that would separate the soccer and dog use area from the children's playground and the oak tree and the basketball area. And we're not crazy about the idea of a fence, but we understand there are concerns about safety for the children at the tot lot. We've looked at the 311 calls, as have the families of Sierra 2, and we don't see anything in there involving a report of a dog bite or a dog injuring a child. So we think maybe the concerns about dogs injuring children or biting children may be exaggerated. But nevertheless, to allay the concerns of safety that parents might have and the city might have for liability, we would suggest putting a larger fence across that section of the park to prevent dogs from getting near the playground, the kids' playground. That would allow for mixed use. Now, if that still was not amenable to the city, we have another suggestion, and this is on the second map of the handout, and that is basically to keep the area that we have now for the temporary dog park and extend it a little bit further to the north end of the park, so it comes close to Castro. So we expand the area from about 2/3 of an acre to nearly an acre. And then we would have, and then that would be a day-round dog park where it was totally fenced in. Dogs could go there at any time of the day from dawn to dusk, like they can now with the temporary arrangement. And having at least two different access points, one on 4th, one at the north end of Castro. And the one on 4th Avenue would remove that loud and ugly vestibule and just have a simple gate there. So we think that would alleviate a lot of the problems and the congestion there. Of course, this would need a little strict enforcement by this. No, this wouldn't need. Excuse me, it wouldn't need enforcement because it would be off leash all the time. As Trish mentioned, there are other areas where off-leash areas have worked in Davis. There are some in Santa Cruz, in Portland. I won't go into any details on that. Let me just close by saying that we need more dog parks, but they are not built overnight. It takes time to build a new dog park. It could take years. We have a desperate need for dogs to use some space in the Curtis Park neighborhood. Rather than detracting from the charm and the value of the neighborhood, the dog park at Sierra 2 has been an amenity and a community asset for many years. It's recognized that way by homeowners who live nearby who don't even own dogs. It's a key part of the fabric of Curtis Park neighborhood, and we think it would be a shame to lose it. So thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Dan. Yeah, we're doing some questions, yeah, so, okay, perfect, okay, first, oh, yeah.
Do you want us to go someplace else?
No, that's fine, I'll just read aloud. So the first question is from the Dog X Party. Why does Common Ground oppose the Curtis Park north-south options? Want to take that?
I will take that. I'll tell you why. We had, as you recall, a survey of Curtis Park, and it included some land park people too, but 80% of the respondents, when asked where would you like the dogs to be off leash, said predominantly, 75% said at CR2. Nobody really wanted the off-leash dogs at either area in Curtis Park. The other reason is that there's only parking on one side of the street. We have a lot of older mobility impaired people in our neighborhood. It wouldn't be possible for them really to squeeze in and park very well, as there's only parking on one side of the street, and for the south option, there's no parking on Sutterville, so that's even less. Sutterville is hard to hear. It's busy and loud. Dogs need to hear commands, and people need to hear one another. So south was not a big thing, and nobody wanted to lose North Curtis Park because that's music in the park. It's Curtis Fest. It's all those things.
Nice, perfect. Okay, so next, these are three questions kind of asking the same thing in a couple different ways. So the basic question is around liability, around have you checked with the city attorney around any like legal or regulatory restrictions or guidelines on use of CR2? So liability, legal elements, you want to address those? How do you?
Yeah, you're the attorney.
Okay.
Yeah.
We have not consulted with the city attorney's office on this, but it seems to us that if there's a concern about a child being injured, that could be ameliorated by having a fence blocking the tot lot from the rest of the park. And also, if if we had a totally fenced-in dog park like we have now, the temporary one, the city would not have any liability, because on an official dog park, there's a state statute, I believe it's in the government code, that says, it's a state statute, it's in the government code, and it says that basically that a municipality is not liable for any dog related injuries within a dog park. Basically, you enter with your dog at your own risk. So if that's the liability concern, there's a statute that protects the city from that.
Nice, thank you. Okay, last question is around a clarification of your point around your dismay at removing the soccer field, and then a comment of, did you petition the city for a minimum of a 2 and a 2.5 acre dog park? So it's kind of a clarification.
Yeah.
Are you surprised at the removal of the soccer park, or, yeah, thanks.
Okay, when we first started this, we did some research and we looked at the city's website, and it said Sierra 2 was 5 acres. Sierra 2 Park was 5 acres. And we thought, okay, 5 acres. Soccer maybe needs an acre or 2. So somewhere on, and we need, deduct the playground, deduct the basketball court. There ought to be some space, like 1 or 2 acres, 2.5 acres. Let's start high and have them, chip us down. So that's where we came from. Then later, we understood, the whole property that the city owns called Sierra 2, which includes this building, is the 5 acres. So we came back to, okay, what if it's about 1 acre and it's a smaller soccer field? I mean, there's somewhere in there where things can work out. And we have presented at least one design which preserves a 9v9 soccer field, but that would be with shared use and it would be fenced, so we could call it fully fenced a dog park, and we reduce the liability for the city.
Nice, thank you both, well done.
Okay.
Well said. Thanks. Okay, yeah. Kinsley, you ready?
Hi, I'm Kinsley. I am a parent advocate for Land Park Soccer, and I'm speaking on behalf of the Land Park Soccer Board. And like a lot of you here tonight, I too am a resident of Curtis Park. And thank you to SCNA for hosting this meeting and inviting Land Park Soccer. Thank you too to the other attendees. Certainly Land Park Soccer does recognize how difficult it is for the city to accommodate all the growing and competing needs at Sierra 2 Green, and we do welcome a constructive conversation around it. For quick background, Land Park Soccer is a nonprofit recreational soccer league. We represent over 1,000 youth soccer players from the surrounding communities, drawing mostly from Land Park, Curtis Park, Hollywood Park, but other areas as well. Land Park Soccer currently holds a permit for the Sierra 2 Green soccer field for our fall 2023 season, and we are so thrilled to be back. Our under 12 age division will be returning to Sierra 2 Green this season, starting in August. The field looks amazing right now, thanks in large part to the city and their partnership with Land Park Soccer to get it seeded and growing. So we want to say thank you for that. I'd also like to give a brief explanation of how the city sports fields permits work, because we realize that this information is not really well known or understood, and why would you need to if you didn't need to permit a sports field from the city? But it's important to Land Park Soccer, and it does affect how many fields we have and where we can be. The city designates which of their park spaces can be permitted for sports fields. And those sports fields are further designated either for practices only or for practices and interleague game play. The sports fields are then made available to interested organizations like our own through a yearly application permit process for the paid permits. Land Park Soccer and its league competitors like Greenhaven Soccer look for the fields that will fit the regulation sizes for each of our age group divisions. Those sizes for each age group division are dictated to us by the U.S. Soccer Federation and U.S. Club Soccer. When we find available fields throughout the city that fit those regulation sizes, we apply for and pay for the permits when we are awarded those permits. Each permit that Land Park Soccer holds is limited in scope. It is limited to certain months out of the year, it is limited to certain days of the week, and it is limited to certain hours of the day. That means that every field we permit through the city remains a city park throughout our permitted soccer season. And it is a space we gladly share with all of the other park users when we are not out there for games or practices. And that includes young families and on-leash dogs. But as a youth sports league, Land Park Soccer does agree with the city's current master plan that off-leash dog parks in particular need to remain separated from the fields that our youth sports leagues, like our own, can permit. And our reasoning really boils down to what we have personally encountered within the safety conditions of our fields. Land Park Soccer core purpose is to provide a safe and a fun environment for all children to play soccer in, and we do take safety seriously. To that end, Land Park Soccer enacts and pays for a variety of safety measures out of our own pockets. Among other things, we invest in field equipment on the city fields that we permit, and we invest in turf building efforts and maintenance in partnership with the city on the city park fields when and where it is needed. To give you some idea of the scope, since 2015, Land Park Soccer has invested $180,000 in field improvements on the city fields that we permit, and that includes our turf building efforts. Land Park Soccer is happy to continue investing in those fields because we believe in healthy parks for everyone, and we are proud to contribute to them. But it is important to understand that our turf building is a legitimate safety feature. It is not just an aesthetic. A 2011 study found that the injury rate to soccer players was twice as high on dirt fields as it is on turf fields. In other words, the grass really matters. And we are happy to continue investing in that grass, especially knowing that our seeding efforts, when they are successful, go on to benefit all of the park users who share that space with us. but the key word here is successful. If the grass that we pay and seed cannot grow, then our permitted fields become less safe, and our money goes to waste. As a nonprofit organization, we absolutely want to invest our money, but we cannot afford to waste it. Land Park Soccer does have a long history of permits for fall soccer at Sierra 2 Green, and we absolutely recognize the point made by Common Ground that there was a time in our history when a shared arrangement between off-leash dogs and youth sports seems to have worked out well. But tonight, I can only speak to what the current Land Park Soccer Board has endured during their tenure in the past recent years. I think everyone in the room can agree that the volume of off-leash dogs usage at Sierra 2 Green has grown significantly over the past several years. And with the growth of that off-leash dog usage, Land Park Soccer has unfortunately seen a corresponding decline and deterioration of field conditions at Sierra 2 Green. We are concerned that the volume of off-leash dogs cannot be realistically reduced enough to ensure the safe field conditions that we need. Off-leash dogs tend to dig. And we recognize that digging is an important and a healthy behavior for dogs, and they need a place to do it. But it is a terrible behavior for grass, as is dog urine, as is dog feces. Despite Land Park Soccer ongoing efforts and investment over the past several years, we have not been able to maintain safe conditions at Sierra 2 Green. Our kids have been playing in a patchy dirt field that has increasingly been riddled with dog-dug holes and dog feces, both of which greatly exacerbate the fall and health hazards to our children. In 2021, it reached such a problematic state that Land Park Soccer canceled its permit for Sierra 2 Green in 2022. Going back to the permitting, it is important to understand that that was an act of desperation on the part of Land Park Soccer, because we are facing a shortage of fields. We wound up that year with a patchwork system that at best allowed our under-12 division to at least complete their fall season. And we are facing a larger issue. The city has acknowledged that in addition to being short on dog parks, we are also short on sports fields. And we are trying to partner with the city to resolve that. But as it stands right now, until that issue can be resolved, it means every field that we can permit is that much more important to us. As it stands today, as an example, Sierra 2 Green is currently the only city-permitted field available to Land Park Soccer that is a 9v9 regulation size field and designated for gameplay. So we are beyond grateful to be back on Sierra 2 Green with much safer playing conditions for our children. And looking out at the field today, we are reminded of what is possible for our city parks and our youth sports fields. Sierra 2 Green has gone from being one of the worst fields we faced a few years ago to looking like one of the best we have going into our 2023 season, for which, again, we owe the city our thanks for helping to bring our turf building efforts to fruition this year. And Land Park Soccer is content to take a wait-and-see approach to the current and temporary arrangement at Sierra 2 Green because our most immediate and pressing safety concerns have been addressed by the separation of off-leash dogs from the youth sports field. We absolutely do believe in dog parks. Many of our soccer families are also dog owners, and dogs deserve a safe and a fun place to play. But so do our kids. And based on our experiences at Sierra 2 Green over the last several years, Land Park Soccer is taking the formal position that it is important to keep our youth sports fields separated from our off-leash dog parks. Land Park Soccer is growing, and that should be a good thing for our children. But Land Park Soccer cannot continue to grow without reliable access to more regulation-sized game fields like the one at Sierra 2 Green in its current condition. To that end, we were very intrigued by the proposal put forth on July 19th for the Ray Eames Park, as it appears to include 2 soccer fields. And we would like to talk to the city about that more, but we have not been consulted on that plan, so we don't know yet whether those fields are of the right size and would work for us. But working with what we know to be true today, Land Park Soccer still needs Sierra 2 Green, and we need more fields like it, and we will continue to advocate for both. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Okay, first one. Oh, yeah. All right, the first one is Land let's see. The city has said that shared use is not possible for safety reasons. Would Land Park Soccer re-permit the field if it were shared with off-leash dogs again in the future?
It's hard to answer that question without knowing the exact parameters under which this field would be quote-unquote shared. Under current conditions or under what we saw in 2021, absolutely not. Under something resembling more closely what Dan and Trish talked about, I think we would at least come to the table to consider it, but we'd have to really understand the parameters and the enforcement and how that would work and how it would be enforced, because in 2021, we were doing our own enforcement on our own, and it was not a good experience for anyone out there. So we'd have to see what that actually meant before we could say yes or no.
Matthew, does that answer your question as well? Does that satisfy, or do you have a follow-on? Okay. Okay. Okay, this is another question around, let's see, you mentioned permits are limited in scope. What days, hours, months would you be permitting Sierra Green? So I guess there's a little summary of how the permitting process, like the season, how does that work?
Sure.
Hours, yeah.
So for Sierra 2 Green as it stands right now, we are permitted starting in August for practices. I can give you the exact dates. I'm not coaching on that particular field, so I don't know specifically. But generally speaking, I believe that our hours tend to be from 4 to close. I can get you more information on that. I'd be happy to if you want to come and talk to me afterwards. I can get you in touch with our fields guy. He'd be happy to share the information. And then our games are played on Saturday mornings, usually starting at 8. And depending on the number of teams and fields, I believe our under 12 division this year is over 200 kids, and there are 14 teams, I believe. So when we are hosting home games, and again, most likely I think every week we will be, because of the volume that we need, that Sierra 2 Green will need to host for us. I think those games are 8, 9, 10. I can get you more specific hours on that too. And then our season runs through mid-November. It may be over in October for Sierra 2 Green. Again, I could get our fields guide to answer that specifically, but our last few games in a couple of age divisions will be played in mid-November.
So it starts in like August or something like that?
Yes, next week.
Okay, all right, perfect, great. Okay, and then you touched on this a little bit, but the question is, are you okay with the current setup with a segregated dog park on the west end of the park that doesn't allow dogs in the soccer field? Do you have
Yes.
anything to expand? Yeah.
Yes,
okay.
we are. And
Perfect.
I think the conditions of the field out there right now speak for themselves. That really was our big concern. We can't maintain field conditions at the current volume of dog usage in Sierra 2 Green. We saw what happened over the past few years, and because we are prepared to see how it goes is basically our
Okay.
approach.
Great.
Yeah,
That's it. Thank you so much.
thank you.
Thanks, Kinsley. All right, Anne is up next.
Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for the opportunity to be here and to speak with all of you today. Sierra 2 Park is a really, really small neighborhood park. It's actually only a 3-acre neighborhood park, and it's tightly encircled by 20 existing homes. By definition, neighborhood parks are usually oriented toward the recreation needs of children, and they're designed to serve a half-mile radius. Sierra 2 Park would be an unprecedented location for a permanent dog park. These are the facts. Sacramento doesn't cite dog parks near multiple children's uses for safety reasons. There are more children's uses at Sierra 2 Park than at any other dog park, and they're much closer here than anywhere else. Sacramento has never put a dog park in a neighborhood park surrounded by so many existing homes. There are more existing homes surrounding Sierra 2 Park than exist at all of the other 14 city dog parks combined at the time that those dog parks were built. Sacramento doesn't put them next to neighborhood parks that are surrounded by residences because of the nuisance and the risk of liability. Dog parks are supposed to be sited in regional or community parks, not in neighborhood parks, according to YPSI. Sacramento doesn't recommend citing them in neighborhood parks because of the proximity to children's uses, because of that half-mile radius, which makes them inequitable, because we don't have the infrastructure built into neighborhood parks that we would have for regional or community parks. Sierra 2 Park is just too small. That's the problem. There isn't enough space to really adequately buffer children's uses and existing homes while providing for a dog park that would be desirable for individuals to use. The space constraints ensure conflict. If you look at Google Earth, the entire size of the green is only roughly 2.5 acres. So why can't we just go back to shared use? First of all, it isn't on the table. The city has told us many times that shared use was impossible because of the liability of so many conflicting children's uses. And we also think it's unrealistic just because we can't turn back the clock and go back to a time when there were fewer neighborhood dogs and fewer neighborhood users. There's also been a pattern of non-compliance, and there's a lack of resources for enforcement. There have been some conflicts between off-leash dog use and other park users, and off-leash dog use, as we've heard, damages the amenities, and the dog waste presents a health concern for some of the other park users. We've been told that permit holders wouldn't re-permit the space. The conflict arising from off-leash dog use is evident in the volume of the 311 calls. There are over 300 recent calls related to off-leash dog use at Sierra 2 Park, and 4 main patterns emerge: safety and blocking access, illegal use, and nuisance calls. So the volume of the calls has been misrepresented because the city was only calling from one park address, but they've now realized that there are over 300 calls. And the calls demonstrate that the park also creates a nuisance for surrounding residents by blocking the reasonable use and enjoyment of homes and gardens. There's some examples that I've included of the types of things you would see on 311 calls. 311 isn't an emergency service, so we would never expect to see a serious injury or a dog use, but the call logs reveal a number of serious safety concerns for children, many relating to the proximity of the children's playground, and there's a large volume of callers who report wanting to use the space but who weren't able to do so. They felt unsafe to do so. The temporary dog park, which relates to the common ground proposal we just saw, is a really unsafe design. There are more children's uses surrounding the temporary dog park than in any of the city's 14 dog parks, and they're much closer at Sierra 2 Park. There are just too many uses and they're too close. Best practices require several hundred to thousands of feet between playgrounds and dog parks. At present, there's 3 feet, and the average in Sacramento is over 400 feet. The city has never cited a dog park next to a basketball court or a daycare center or a soccer field. The city should be buffering children's uses by 200 feet at minimum. The city also needs to should push back the temporary space from the street because at present children need to exit the park if they're going from the playground to the basketball court, and already tragically 2 dogs have been struck by cars. This is a really unsafe design. The proposal, the concept design for the Sierra 2 Park is unacceptable from our point of view. First of all, it's the only design out of the 8 that removes an amenity. It takes away the children's sport field. It also has no buffer for the daycare, playground, or the Sierra 2 Center or the residents. There's an inadequate playground buffer. It puts a regional facility inside a neighborhood park, and it more than doubles the existing dog park, which means double the nuisance and the traffic and the eyesore. The design is also exclusionary. It converts a multi-use space that's open to everyone into a single-use space that excludes most of the park users, including children. Most of the green, 60% of the green, would be converted to a permanent dog park. So those are our concerns about the proposal at Sierra 2 Park. We think that the city and all of the residents of Curtis Park should be prioritizing children over dogs. There are already 3 dog parks within a 3-mile radius of Sierra 2 Park. Truett Bark Park is 1.5 miles away, and it cost $1.3 million to build. DogX and Common Ground members officially asked the city for a minimum of 2 acres, and the design that we see at Sierra 2 Park is only slightly smaller than that. It's 1.5 acres. But we've seen that the definition of a neighborhood park ought to be primarily oriented towards children. And this park, this design really takes away a youth athletic field that everybody else, as Kinsley said, that everybody else could use outside of games and practice, including dogs on leash. It builds a regional dog park that's only going to be accessible to dogs and their owners who are over 14. The plan would use taxpayer money to remove a revenue-generating amenity that was intended for children in order to replace it with off-leash dog use, which doesn't generate any revenue and excludes children and creates a sun-up to sundown nuisance for surrounding residents. It also requires the creation of a new amenity in an established neighborhood, which is especially inequitable considering the massive deferred maintenance backlog for Yipsy and the shortage of pools for children citywide. Fortunately, there are a bunch of win-win locations nearby that are much better than the Sierra 2 option. All of the other locations don't remove any amenities. We don't think it's a good idea to put a permanent dog park in any of the parks that are surrounded by existing homes without buffering them. The Land Park Option 3 along Freeport Boulevard and the Bell Coolidge option affect no residents. And we wonder why the city saw fit to buffer the residents, the homes at Land Park Option 1 and 2, but not any of the homes in the Curtis Park neighborhood at Sierra 2 or Curtis Park or at Ray Eames Park. 6 of the 8 concept plans actually offer bigger dog parks than the dog park that's proposed at Sierra 2 Park. They offer 2 acres instead of 1.5 acres. We think that the Bell Coolidge option is probably the most fiscally responsible and equitable because it involves improving an existing amenity. And another thing to think about is the footprint of the proposed dog park. At all other locations, it takes up a much smaller percentage of the overall park space than at Sierra 2 Park. Sierra 2 Park, it's 60%, but all of the land park options are actually under 1% of the overall park space. I've included a picture of the Sierra 2 Park Master Plan from 1982. Children's sports promote self-esteem and teamwork and problem solving and mental and physical health. And children's health and exercise and well-being should be the city's top priority and Curtis Park's top priority, not the convenience of a minority of dog users. The soccer field has existed at Sierra 2 Park for more than 40 years, decades longer than any off-leash dog use on the green. There's always been a sports field here. Before a soccer field, there was actually a baseball field. So building a permanent dog park at Sierra 2 Park means taking a neighborhood park away from children. The convenience of dog users isn't more important than the rights of everybody else to use the neighborhood park safely. There are much better locations nearby that offer off-leash dog users more space without removing any amenities or negatively impacting any residents. Children's needs for exercise and mental and physical health are more important than dogs' needs for off-leash exercise. So we really think it's still possible to provide off-leash dog users with everything they're asking for nearby, but Sierra 2 Park is a neighborhood park, and neighborhood parks are for our children. Thank you.
Okay, so the first question is, what is your first choice of another park site for the dog park?
We still want to, all of us are in the exact same boat. We all got these concept plans just 48 hours before we had the feedback period. So I'd be curious to learn what residents around the park and that use those spaces more than I do would say about the different locations. But right now, as I said in the presentation, we really like Land Park Option 3 because it's just a mile away. It's actually a shorter it's almost the same distance as the south end of Curtis Park. And there are no residences, no children's uses anywhere nearby. So those are some of the concerns that we're thinking about. Bell Coolidge also seems great. And both of the other land park options, Land Park Option 1, which is closer than Land Park Option 3 and closer than the south end of Curtis Park, those options buffer the existing homes, and that isn't the case at the Sierra 2 Park or the Curtis Park or even the Ray Eames Park locations.
Awesome, thank you. quick clarification. Someone wrote YPCE. Maybe I'm dense.
YPCE,
Which is what?
parks.
Oh, okay. Got it. Okay. So this question is, if YPCE has said that dog parks should not be cited in neighborhood parks, why have they proposed, proposed the dog park option in Sierra 2?
Because there was a huge push to put one here, but this is this would be an exception. There's only one of the city's 14 dog parks is located in a neighborhood park at University Avenue, and it is nothing like Sierra 2 Park. The dog park is separated from, it's in the shadow of a transmission tower. It's was basically an unused space. It's separated from the rest of the park by a road that would make it, completely separate. And there were only 2 existing homes at that park, so it's nothing at all like Sierra 2 Park.
Okay. Perfect. Last question is a comment around, every dog has an owner and a family. What do you say to your neighbors who don't want to drive to a dog park? Comments on that. It's not really much of a clarification, but I guess your opinion on that.
Well, we think that children's well-being in a neighborhood park is more important than the convenience of minority of off-leash dog users. But at the same time, Sierra 2 Park is already a neighborhood park where everybody is welcome, including dogs. They just need to be on leash. We don't have any opposition, and we are totally for dog parks. The only problem is that at Sierra 2 Park, there really isn't a room to build a dog park that's big enough that people will use while adequately buffering children's uses and the existing residences around the park.
Great. Thank you, Ann. Appreciate it. All right, next up, Talene and Dave. Dave, you going first? David? Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Okay, nice to see you all. Thanks, everybody, for coming. My name's Dave Knox. I've lived in Curtis Park for 25 years. I've been coming to the dog park for 2.5 of those because we have a dog that absolutely loves it. Our previous dog, we brought her, and a big black dog looked at her, gave her a dirty look. She ran to the gate. We went and got her and never came back. So she, it wasn't appropriate for her. But our current dog absolutely loves it. There's a story about Disneyland that when it was being built, they got to the point where they were going to put in the paths and the walkways. And I guess Walt Disney told them, hold on, wait, let's see where people create their own paths. Okay, so they didn't, they let that happen, and then they put in the paths and walkways where people were actually using them. And a process that evolved naturally, right? So that's the story here with our Sierra 2 Green and the dog use. It's been, Dogzillery has been in existence for 25 years, sanctioned by the city in 1998, 2008, and 2013. There are currently almost 800 members, and they're all kinds of ages, walks of life, families, young couples, new to Curtis Park, many seniors who've been coming here for a long, long time, sometimes decades, many physically limited people who coming here gives them an opportunity to get out of the house. They may live in isolation, but with their physical limitations, they can't do a whole lot. They come here and they're actually create their social life here. So during COVID, especially, it was a godsend for the dog owner's physical and mental health. I mean, we haven't come here only for our dog's health. It's for our own chance to get out. We've made a lot of friends here. It's a very special place. I personally made at least 30 friends here who And for some of us, it's a good part of our social life. I sometimes come not necessarily for my dog, but to check on people if I haven't seen them for a little while. And dogs need exercise every day, year-round, okay? Which of course you all understand. And as far as dogs, and everyone who has a dog probably knows that the dog is family, right? You consider the dog part of your family. And I know during COVID, there was a lot of growth, a lot more people coming, because people found out that it's a wonderful place. It's a much more desirable space for dogs than any other place until now, has been. I know that, you know, the hours were not enforced, and that was another sort of a natural process where people were home. People were working from home. They needed to get out. The question of hours can be remedied with some education and enforcement. Now, enforcement, I don't know why the enforcement fell off during COVID, but that's something that could be reconsidered and possibly come back. The city should be adding dog parks, not taking them away from us. Okay, I think there should be at least one dog park in the land park, but why take this one away? Okay, Curtis Park, on my block in Curtis Park, I live on Curtis Way near Curtis Park, I counted 16 dogs and 14 kids. Five of the kids are under two years old. But I don't see this as a dogs versus kids thing. It's a people thing, okay? We are people who own dogs. It would have been nice to have this or something like this about a year ago, both with the SCNA and maybe the city also, but it was allowed to fester. YPC, from my perspective, considered it a pretty low priority, but it was pressed by the SCNA, who emphasized liability and no permits, without acknowledging that there had been an agreement in the past, and the city put up signs with the guidelines. So now here we are, and I think there's an opportunity now to be creative, to think out of the box, and find a solution that works for most of us, okay? I don't know if we'll have a win-win with everyone happy, but I think we can do better.
All right, nice. Thank you, Dave. Appreciate it.
Alrighty. Hello, everyone. I'm Talene, also with DogX. This meeting coincided with a very busy time in my life, so I don't have a prepared presentation that's quite as polished as the ones we've heard thus far, and largely want to continue the themes that my partner here, Dave, just outlined, and go over some of the, I think, assumptions from some of the other presentations that we haven't found to be true in our own experience here. So, but starting with, again, I'm Talene. I've moved into Curtis Park neighborhood about 3 or 4 years ago. I was in Land Park before then. Bought my house, small little bungalow, no backyard. We all know how it goes around here. And was able to rescue a dog because I saw the Sierra 2 and the ability to exercise and socialize my dog there. Absolute godsend to have it during the pandemic. I have a note in my phone where I just list the names of people that I've met and their dogs. My husband even started a dog-based local company that prints shirts and hats with all local designers, all local printing, based on how much he felt Sacramento was a dog-friendly city, which was very much personally experienced through his time at the Sierra 2 and our time. So just a complete gem of an amenity is how we see it, and we continue to see it. We absolutely don't see it as dogs v. children. In fact, I'm not usually this big. Definitely have a kid on the way. Very much hope to be able to have a tot lot in close proximity to where my husband is able to exercise the dog. I understand that that might mean a higher fence than what's currently there, but me and many people that I've spoken to who live in the neighborhood come to that space and use that space because of the proximity of the tot lot to the dog area. We also see multiple children in the dog area that of course they come from families with dogs. We also see children that come with their parents who don't have access to dogs and are learning how to interact with them safely. That is just as important. We think children are safer as a result of dogs that are well exercised, well socialized, and when they themselves have learned how to interact with dogs in a safe way. So we also agree with Common Ground that perhaps the safety concerns cited in other presentations have been exaggerated. We're also concerned about the 311 calls that were cited in the presentation and how current they are. We'd be curious to know how many of them come from individual callers or complainers versus a handful of individuals. We also think a park that's used is safer than a park that isn't used. So we've heard about the fairly minimal needs of the Land Park Soccer Association when you break it down by hours, days, months of the year. And we think that a park is safer when people use it because it also keeps folks who might stumble upon it, might have trash, might have needles, might have bottles, issues that we've seen from using that space in off hours when there are folks like dog owners and their dogs there who see trash, pick it up because they have the same safety concerns about those bottles and needles and trash on the field, and or just their presence deters the presence of other more unsavory elements. So we would very much welcome a conversation a dialogue, which this is not, but a dialogue where we try to meet the needs of the Land Park Association. I played soccer for 30 years, only stopped because I'm pregnant. We are not anti-soccer. DogX is not some niche group. It's a group of hundreds of individuals, SCNA members, neighbors, soccer players, parents of children, parents of soon-to-be children. Like, we are you. We are not some niche. We've been maligned from the very beginning and not invited for a dialogue by our neighborhood association. And that's a shame because we were and are incredibly reasonable and looking out for the needs of this community. And we want this neighborhood association to stay current. The community is changing. The association should meet the community and make sure that it continues to meet the needs of the community. If we're starting to see more dogs than children, if we're starting to see younger couples move in here with different needs, maybe they're not coming to a wine event or a house event, but maybe if there was events related to dog training, safety, other things at the green, that they would be engaged. So I think there's opportunities that are being left on the table by the neighborhood association by maligning DogX and the hundreds, if not thousands, of people in Curtis Park who have dogs. We are not a minority. We're 40% of households. Thank you.
Nice, thank you. Okay, so the question is, would DogX members be willing to contribute to a stewardship program to repair or maintain the field? A stewardship program to maintain or repair the field. Would DogX members be willing to contribute to it and fund it? Fundraising, yes.
Yes, that's something that's been discussed for almost a year now. Whether it's field maintenance or helping fund adequate fencing that alleviates some of the liability concerns that folks might have about the open parking lot or the height of the fencing between the tot lot and what might become a more permanent dog solution. Absolutely. You heard the number of people in our group. It's nearing 800 folks. There's folks who'd pay a monthly membership to use that space. Let's not forget, there's people who bought their homes, made really big financial decisions. around the fact that they live within walking distance or a very short drive of a place that permits them to have a happy, healthy dog. People are moving into Sacramento to buy houses, to have dogs. That's the reality we're living in. People are leaving bigger cities to come here to buy homes so they can have dogs. They need a place to exercise and socialize them, and they want to meet their neighbors. They love that there's a neighborhood association. They love meeting folks in the backyard of it, and they would be more and more engaged with the activities of the neighborhood association if they were permitted to do so. So, hard yes.
Nice. Well said. Thank you.
Thank you.
So anything to add? Yeah, that's it. Great. Thank you. All right. Terry's going to bring us home here.
Well, thank you all for being here. I'm Terry Shettle, and I've been the executive director for SCNA and Sierra 2 for 14 years. I've been a resident in Curtis Park for over 22 years. SCNA was formed in 1981 to prevent the demolition of the Sierra School and turn it into a neighborhood resource. The two primary priorities for SCNA, per the founding documents, are to operate the Sierra 2 to promote and sponsor educational, cultural, community, and recreational programs, and to advocate for and promote quality of life in the neighborhood. Sierra School, now Sierra 2 Center for the Arts and Community, was built in 1923. But it became a designated historic landmark in 2005. The property is owned by the city, and the lease administration goes through YPCE, the Parks Department. For more than 40 years, Sierra 2 has been the social and architectural centerpiece of the neighborhood. It has served as the epicenter for SCNA's board and committee meetings, neighborhood gatherings such as First Fridays, fundraising events, annual egg hunt, neighborhood voting center, and a central hub for the members. Sierra 2 Green has a symbiotic connection to the center with a history of use being the original school playground, and since then, similarly, a park and playground with a sports field. It has been a refuge for neighbors, for Sierra 2 and DMV staff, for visitors and event attendees and tenants. The adjacency of a peaceful, open space fosters an ambiance in keeping with a historic landmark venue. Sierra 2 is a collection of classrooms and spaces refurbished to create a venue housing 3 dance studios, a performing arts theater, a banquet hall, used to be the cafeteria, a small reception space, and 5 individual rooms. The senior center operates out of one of those rooms. In addition to these spaces, there are 12 tenants, including a commercial vegan bakery, a catering kitchen, a daycare, a yoga center, a meditation center, an AA support group, a comic book designer, Braille transcribers, a nonprofit for families who have children with special needs, and 3 different performing arts coaching businesses. Annually, pre-COVID, in the senior center, we would get about 13,000 visitors to the senior center. We get about 300,000 now, 300,000 visitors to Sierra 2 Center, not including the tenant activities. Some of the other activities here are art instruction and education, dance, all varieties, fitness, many types, martial arts, children's and adult theater camps and productions, film festivals, life celebrations, business meetings, puppy and dog training classes, somebody asked about that, business meetings, conferences and workshops, community and neighborhood meetings. Sierra 2 Center accounts for 85% of the annual revenue for SCNA. Operating a successful community center affords SCNA with professional admin staff for board support and organizational resources, membership support, marketing and communications expertise, and a centralized place for people to actively or passively engage with the organization. SCNA is unlike any other neighborhood association. For this reason, at the very least, every member of the board should be interested in protecting and advocating for the health of the Sierra 2 operations. Simply put, Sierra 2 Center is the lifeblood of SCNA. We have 3 concerns about the direct impacts of a permanent dog park on the operations. The noise nuisance, along with the adjacent fencing, the noise nuisance to the studios, the offices in the back, the daycare, yoga and meditation classes, dance classes, children's activities, and are already disrupted with ongoing erratic, intermittent, and often constant barking and fighting. Restricted access to the back of the building right now with the fencing. We have it's very tight back there to get to our HVAC mechanical systems, the back of the building, the roof, the gutters, the windows. Yipsy's going to have to trim that tree, and they're going to have fun getting to that. So if a permanent fence goes in there, that is going to be an issue. And we already cannot open the windows on that whole backside due to the noise, the dust, and the odor from the dog waste. Second issue is the traffic. It's already been talked about, so I won't go into that too much more. Parking. We have a total of 90 spaces to accommodate all of the traffic that comes through this building. That's including the Castro lot, which is not a park amenity, and this main lot, and that includes the ADA spaces. We try to balance our bookings. We actually restrict bookings to make sure that we are not overloading the streets and the parking lots, but we can't possibly know how many cars are going to come from other parts of the city at all hours of the day if a dog park were to be installed. If our visitors and our tenants are regularly unable to find or easily get to parking in our lots or nearby, we will see a decline in business. There are also 3 indirect but very related concerns. The spatial and visual adjacency to a historic landmark. Turning a former school playground for children into a dog park with fencing and other incompatible architectural design elements that would essentially exclude children and change the adjacent usage is hardly a minimal change to spatial relationships as required by the preservation guidelines. It would become a dirt wasteland and detract from the visual aesthetics of the property. I have a picture of whoever mentioned the University Avenue Dog Park. I was actually there on Sunday walking by it, and I snapped a picture, and it is, I would imagine, what we will become. Where else in the city would you put a dog park up against a historical venue or historic landmark? Loss of the sports field, this has already been discussed, but it's a big concern for us. This field has served hundreds of children every year for organized games and practices for more than 40 years. That's a huge institutional use. Casual use of the field would be eliminated. Right now we're seeing a lot of, every day we're seeing activity on that field where kids are just kicking the soccer ball around, not practice, just out there playing. There is a known lack of soccer fields in the city. Curtis Park is underserved in children's amenities already, and you're talking about taking that away. Loss of open space. Trust for Public Lands is an organization whose mission is to create parks and protect land for people, ensuring healthy, livable communities for generations to come. They perform an annual park score survey in the top 100 cities in the country. In 2013, Sacramento was tied for 3rd with Boston and San Francisco in the nation. 2018, we were number 22. In 2023, we are number 30. We don't have enough open green space for the population, for the city needs. And their whole thing is about creating acreage with relative abundance of parks to include natural areas that provide critical mental health as well as climate and conservation benefits. We're not keeping up with our open space. We take away and turn this into a dog park, we lose more open space. And then converting the park to a permanent dog park is a threat to Sierra 2 operations and its financial health, which ultimately means the neighborhood's health, the entire neighborhood. Profits from Sierra 2 operations cover the funding gaps for the senior center, music in the park, viewpoint egg hunt, neighborhood advocacy and needs such as support of the racial justice and clean and quiet yard care programs. It covers legal and professional fees needed and tree appeals. Revenue generated from the studios and daycare, just those 2 sources, are about $200,000 a year. Even if we just lost 10% of our customers because of the noise, the traffic, the parking, or the visual blight, that would put us in a difficult financial position. Is the city prepared to step in should this imperil our financial stability? A decline in financial health would also impact our ability to be a preferred resource for social wellness, artistic, cultural, recreational, and educational pursuits. Our reputation as a cultural hub and artistic incubator is at stake. Our ability to maintain the property to required standards for historic preservation, safety, rentability, and aesthetics is at stake. Our ability to sustain the work of the neighborhood association for the members is at stake. SCNA's purpose to advocate for the quality of life is a key point in this issue. With the preponderance of reasons a dog park belongs elsewhere, not in a neighborhood park, SCNA must look at this organizational focus as a guide point. What we are talking about with the permanent dog park is excluding general public from the use of decades-old city park in favor of special interest group. We're talking about eliminating a youth sports field at a time when our youth, the hardest hit group during COVID, is finally resuming normal activities, knowingly jeopardizing the financial health of the historic landmark and longtime arts, cultural, social, and educational resource, impacting the livelihoods of hundreds of instructors, small businesses, theatrical productions, and SCNA staff. The neighbors will suffer their quality of life by having this imposed on them. Every SCNA board member, city council, and YPSI leadership should have as a top priority to support, advocate for, and protect the financial health of Sierra 2 Center, or at least not knowingly install something that will hinder it. A permanent dog park at the Sierra 2 Green is a decision that would impose a significant direct threat to the sustainability of the operations as we know them and longer-term SCNA. Thank you.
Okay, so first question, do you have any figures of the number of tenants that have discontinued their lease citing issues with the dog park to date?
Well, the dog park is not a permanent dog park, first of all. The temporary dog park has only been there a few months. The lease renewals have not taken place yet. We have had I know some things have been sent to the city. So no, I don't have any numbers. This is a temporary situation, and I think it remains to be seen. If it becomes a permanent dog park that is promoted on the city's website as a permanent dog park, it goes out to the entire community, the entire city, and then, we all love Curtis Park. Why wouldn't you want to bring your dogs here if it's a permanent dog park, right? So that's where I think this situation is not an immediate, it's going to shut us down. I equate it to the boiling frog situation. You slowly, heat the frog, and then it's too late. So, so that's kind of where I think we are. I think people will just sort of adjust to it at first, and then people will gradually start to get fed up with it. When we were pre-COVID, 2019, we were just so crazy busy, and parking in our own making was an issue, and people would start to say, it's too hard to park there. I think I'll just go to a different class. And so we started taking a look at our booking systems and say, okay, well, how do we manage this? And we started layering in how we were going to manage that and still keep our financial health in place.
And so this is, thank you, that was a good, here we go, clarification of you have received complaints from tenants on the park.
I know that some tenants and renters, our block users, our quasi-tenants, have sent letters to the city about the noise and disturbance in the studios in particular.
Got it. This is a question around if a coexisting solution will work in your opinion. Why can't it work? If we went back to the kind of coexisting on the space, are you opposed to that? No, that's not what this question says, but yeah.
Are you talking about the before 9 o'clock, after 5 o'clock kind of situation?
Yeah, it just says before 2022, people coexisted on the green. Why can't it continue to work?
Yeah, I would say before COVID. I actually used to take my dogs to the park at 6 a.m., and we were out of there by 7 a.m., and I was at work at 8 or 9. I don't know how you put the genie back in the bottle at this point. I think it would be, it's a nice thought, but honestly, I don't know how you with everybody being, we know that people are coming from other neighborhoods already to use the park, and they're not going to stop coming here, and you're not going to be able to manage them. You don't have a registration process, you don't have any sort of policing process, and we already know that there was a lot of compliance issues with the schedule that they were allowed before. So I think it would be great if we could come up with a solution like that. I don't know how it works with the fields. it would certainly mean that the open space, green space use would be available to everybody, and it's huge, not being able to use that park. Right now, it's a playground, a sports field, and a dog park. You can't go out there and just play. You can't go out there and just wander around, sit under a tree with a picnic. So.
And this is just a follow-on question around, would you be amenable if earlier hours were enforced, outside of business hours? Kind of a follow-on question about the hours.
Well, the biggest issue, again, my comments were about a permanent dog park. So if you and that is the proposal that was put as a concept at the open house. If it is a permanent dog park all day long, 7 days a week, sun up to sundown, dogs coming from all over the city all day long, and they're, every time a new dog comes in the gate, you hear them barking, they get excited. I mean, it's a pattern. I hear it every day, all day long. If it's a permanent dog park, the situation is very different. If you try to do that where you don't have the fencing, it's just come and you go, the way it used to be. Again, I don't know how you put the genie back in the bottle.
Great, thank you.
Yep. Thanks.
Okay, so that concludes our session. If there are additional questions that people have, I think we can reach out to the board. You can reach out to individual members of the groups. So that's that. I do want to say thank you so much to all the presenters. I know a 10-minute presentation on a weekday, not ideal. It's a lot of effort. Well done, very well researched and presented points. I do hope this puts us on a better footing as a community. I definitely agreed with some of the points on each of the presentations. I hope all of you did as well. And I think I reiterate one of the groups saying, I hope next time we do this earlier, right? Let's not wait so long. This is not that hard to set up. We don't need it to be this formal. Let's come together, have a conversation. Hopefully we can find a solution before we involve the city next time. So anyways, thank you so much for coming, and we'll see you around the neighborhood. Thanks. Yeah.